Hey everyone, it's Brian Porter. Today we're going to be walking through making one of our HSS Deluxe loaded pick guards. So we're going to walk through the wiring, we're going to show you a couple of the components and kind of how we put it together. We're just going to take the camera to the bench and I'm going to wire this thing up and talk to you about what we're seeing on the screen at the same time. So hopefully this is helpful and interesting to you if you're looking for a great loaded pick guard, our deluxe loaded pick guard. And you know, it won't be called deluxe, it's the push-pull mini toggle add neck, I think, on the HSS loaded pick guard page. I'll put a link to that down below as well. That's one of my favorite ways to get the most out of your Strat style guitars. You have not only the push-pull on the volume to split that bridge humbucker, but you have the add neck mini toggle, which will bring the neck into the circuit at any point where you're at on the 5-way switch. So that allows you to do bridge neck combos, that allows you to do all 3 pickup combos. So let's check it out. Let's go to the bench. All right, first things first, we have all the elements of the loaded pick guard. We are going to have a beautiful tortoise guard here. You can see that on the camera. Very nice HSS tortoise. Typically on all of our guards, we're going to have your standard layouts. If you order an HH guard, there's going to be just 2 pots here, 2 potholes. It kind of just depends on what you want. We can do some custom stuff within all of that, but we're going to start with this as our basic platform. So typically, like as this comes through, so we're going to have vintage customs in the neck in the middle, and then we're going to have the overdrive plus in the bridge, and this is a zebra. So it's going to look really nice. We're going to have a zebra bridge humbucker with cream singles, so that's going to match all nicely. And this particular customer chose the cream appointments on the knobs and everything as well. So I love that. I love that look. I love how it kind of all lays out. So again, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is our deluxe version. So we are going to have the push-pull, and this is all pre-wired. I've kind of wired this up ahead of time, so hopefully you can see that on the camera focus-wise. But basically, this is the volume knob sort of pre-wired. So over here we've got the black wire is going to go to the switch. This is the ground wire that goes between the pots. So typically we're pre-measuring this to run between the pots here. And then the white wire is going to go to the jack, the hot of the jack. And if you look closely up in this area, you're going to see a very small wire that's coming here. This is for the push-pull feature. So our green and white are going to go to here, this middle lug, and then that's going to allow us to split the bridge pickup, and what that'll do is leave only this cream screw coil active on here. So pre-wiring this saves a lot of time if you're looking at wiring one of these up. Getting this stuff done ahead of time and popping it in is better. If you're doing a regular Strat harness, sometimes you can pre-wire it. If you've got an old pick guard laying around, or maybe buy one online, you can just kind of cut this area out, and that's like a template for making guards ahead of time. Chances are you probably don't make hundreds of guards like we do a year, but even if you make a couple, it would really save you a lot of time. All right, and so then the other thing is pre-wired our mini toggle here. You can see a couple really long small gauge wires coming off of that. This is a regular on-on switch. So if you're looking for a mini toggle that will work, in this case we need an on-on. So both positions are on. It's literally just selecting between each one. That's all we're trying to do. So that's going to be wired into the switch in a way to bring that neck pickup in. And we'll go into more detail as we jump in. So the first thing we got to do, because we have a flat surface, is we've got to make a mark where we want this mini toggle to go. So that's going to be a 1/4 inch hole. And typically we're going to put it down here in this area just outside the pots. Typically when you put your pots in there, you can't put it right between sometimes because you have the ends of the pots that are going to run into that switch. And so we like to offset it slightly. I like to have it here because it's sort of in line with this switch and it's out of the way from where you're playing, so you're not popping that add neck at any time. It's just down there, and it's a little quicker and a little bit more discreet. Some people don't like the look of a toggle, and you could wire the add neck to a regular push-pull as well, but I do like having the toggle just to instantly access it on and off. So before we load anything in the guard, we need to have a flat surface to mark this out and to drill our hole. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so we've got our backing board here for the drilling that we're going to do. And again, you can use a drill press. Would be advisable to have as straight of a hole as possible because you're going to want to make sure that nothing goes crazy. Really highly recommend that you use a brad point bit so that's got a nice fine tip on it to make sure that you can get that hole exactly where you want it. Well, I'll show you my little trick for that. So we're going to lay this here. This is not the best backing board, but it will work. I've got my calipers set to 22 millimeters. This is kind of a way that I do this, kind of the poor man's way. So again, we're going to want this kind of outside of this middle area. So keep that in mind. Remember, when you're putting in all this hardware, you just don't want stuff running into each other. So what I usually will do is I'll find the center, and I've got this at 22. I'll find the center, and I'm going to go just kind of out into this no man's land here, and I'm going to poke a mark. So there's one mark there. I'm going to do the same here for the center, and I'm going to poke another mark kind of in the general area. So I don't know if you can see on the camera here, it's going to be pretty reflective with the shield adhesive on there. But basically we've got 2 marks. We've got 2 marks, and now that's going to be the center of where we want to put that mini toggle. So what we're going to do is going to make sure we have it secure. I'm going to put my brad point directly in the center of those and go slow with this part of it. Give it a couple quick triggers like that, and there we go. We have our hole for that add neck mini toggle. So now it's fairly straight in between there. It's out of the way, so the lugs of the pots will be missing that, and it's nice and in a nice and discreet location. You can put this anywhere you want. Just keep in mind you're going to need room for the actual electronics underneath. If you've got something already loaded up, you can remove the electronics and drill this hole. You can try to drill it while it's in the guitar, but I wouldn't advise that. All right, so now let's start loading in the components, and then we'll get to the wiring. Then we'll put that bridge pickup in. We'll grab some mounting hardware for that and put that in probably at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the electronics section now, get all of that stuff put in. First thing I'm going to do is get that mini toggle put in. So in this case, we've got kind of that lock washer here, and I'm typically going to face it so my wires are away from here. That will mean that when this is down, the mini toggle will be adding the neck as you push it down. Now you might decide that you'd rather have it up for add neck, but this is the way we do it for stock. And then we've got this little washer here. And this is kind of got a little indicator on it and a very small nut. And if you have a socket that's exactly the size of this, we really recommend something like that. This is going to want to be aligned as straight as possible here. So holding that in place on the bottom side and tightening it, then we've got the toggle action happening kind of here. You could have it be this way if you want. It doesn't really matter. But again, this is just stock how we do it. So the only thing we're going to need to do is very carefully, this is the part that can go extremely wrong, is going to grip the bottom side here and just grab it with some pliers. And we're not trying to crazy tighten this. Again, these are not the most solid switches in the world. So all we're trying to do is get it tighter than hand, but not wail on it. So that's not going anywhere if we're moving that switch over and over again. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add the other pots, and then again come back to the bridge humbucker. So we will start with our push-pull. And now here's another thing that we like to do on our loaded pick guards is we want to make sure that we leave this, again, a personal preference here. Some people really don't have a strong opinion either way, but for me, I want to make sure a lot of this is sticking out, so that if I'm going down below one of these knobs here, I can actually grab it and pull it up. Sometimes I feel like the Strat knobs are a little slippery. So first thing we're going to do is put that in and get the lock washer in there. Now you can see we just got just outside of those pots. You can see how there would be not much room down below. That's just going to allow us to get the rest of that wiring done. So we've got all of that going. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go get the mounting screws for that bridge humbucker. We're going to get that put in place. I'll show you a couple tricks there. And then we'll start doing some wiring. And I'm going to give you guys kind of a basic overview of the wiring and some highlights. I'll move the camera in close so you can kind of see what we do. And then we'll be back in a second. All right, back here at the bench, got the rest of the components. I'm trying to plan ahead. Obviously, as you film stuff, you're not thinking about the same things that you that you normally would when you're just going for it. So I've got my jack here. I've got, and I'll make sure everything is showing up on the camera for you guys. Yeah, looks good. Okay, got the jack. We've got our beautiful zebra humbucker just getting ready to put in. We have our mounting screws now for this humbucker. So let's go ahead and put the humbucker in. Again, I really highly recommend sweeping your bench often, putting new paper towels down as you start soldering, as there's little components that you're cutting and you're trimming. You want to make sure that you don't have issues there. So we're going to load in this bridge humbucker here. Start with our screws, and we're going to put our springs in here. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of pulling it off to the side. I'll back this up just so you can see kind of the way I'm staging this. I'm trying not to let the springs fall off. Now, there's a bunch of methods to doing this part of it, and this is just, again, the way that we kind of hold everything together as we go. Really like to use, again, the power screwdrivers, but if you want to use a regular screwdriver, that's fine. So we're going to get that bridge pickup placed, and we're going to try to align everything. So I really like to just get one side started, just making sure it threads, and then we're going to flip this around. And at this point, then you can kind of go straight on. So even as I turn that, you can see the spring went flying. So you want to hold that in place. And again, this is kind of like takes longer to teach it than to just do it sometimes. But okay, so we're gonna give a couple short triggers. We've got that there. We want to make sure everything gets aligned straight. Then I can give it a little bit more juice as I'm bringing everything up. Now, I'm not really worried about pickup heights at this point. I'm just trying to get it there and aligned. Typically, this is going to be higher than the single coils on most setups. So I might look at it and say, well, let's bring this up a little bit. But for now, we're not going to worry about it. I like keeping the protective plastic on the pickup so we don't get scratches, and we install everything, and then the customer needs to pull off the protective clear on this guard. So that's kind of the way we do it there. All right, so we've got pretty much everything going here, and I'm going to slide this over just a bit. Look at the screen here to make sure it's somewhat centered for you guys. I'm kind of straddling the camera tripod to sort of make this work. Now, obviously, looks like a pretty big rat's nest, and the actual wiring of this is one of the more time-consuming pieces of making these pick guards. There's a lot of things to consider. One of the first things that we like to do is grab some nice metal cutters and trim the screws. Always a good idea to wear some safety glasses for this. You trim those humbucker screws. Just trim them back just a little bit. Some Strat pickup routes are very shallow in the bridge humbucker area, so we want to make sure that we're not having the mounting screws run into that. If you buy a pick guard from us and these happen to not be trimmed, then you can trim them yourself, or if you run into this with other manufacturers, it's definitely something to consider. Okay, so now we have a big mess of wires, and now the job is to start organizing it. So I'll move the camera a little closer so you can see kind of how we start making this look like it needs to look. All right, so now we're ready to start wiring. The first thing I want to do is make some marks on our single coil cloth wires to let me know where I need to put them. So my system, and you can do whatever you want here, I'm going to take the neck pickup hot wire and I'm going to put 3 marks on it, and then I'm going to take the middle hot wire and put 2 marks on it. So typically when I'm doing like a regular Strat guard, I'm going to do 3, 2, 1, and that's just a way then that I can indicate what's going on with with the wires. Next thing I'm going to do is take a little piece of tape, and then I'm going to wrap it around the wires to start making neater wire runs here. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab all of the single coil cloth wires right here, and then I'm just going to put a piece of tape in between, so I'm trying to line them up. And we use a solid core on the cloth wire, so they're actually really easy to corral, but you want to make sure you have a neat wire path. So I'm going to put a piece of, that's humbucker finishing tape. You can use electrical tape or masking tape just to make a nice clean and straight line from there. So you might find that I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit, so just follow along if you're looking to wire up something like this. This is kind of one of our preferred wirings that mixes a lot of different wiring options in one. So I'm going to start to think about my wiring path, and really this is something that's going to come with practice. So if you're not familiar with how to make it look neat, that's okay. We know this is the humbucker, so we don't have to worry too much about this. The next thing I'm going to do is we want to take a hard angle here. So we're going to kind of pinch these cloth wires, and we're going to run, these are going to be your hots going to the switch. So we're just going to kind of start building this path. Next thing I'm going to do is take these two ground wires, and I'm going to run them to the side of the push-pull pot here. There's a small little shelf, and that's typically where I like to ground the single coils. So at this point, we're going to grab some solder, and I'll just probably take a little piece off so I can kind of stay in nice and tight with that. I'm going to pre-tin this little section here. And then I know as I'm looking at these wires, I'm going to need to cut them and trim them. So I'm trying to, again, make a really nice and neat path. I want to kind of run this inside the humbucker, run it to the pot here. And I'll save these extra wires. At that point, then we can push back these two wires. I'm going to take my crimping pliers that I had before, and I'm going to twist them together. This is just easier for me to organize the wires. Just going to make a nice little twist here. So, and then as you're soldering and installing stuff, you can do tweezers, you can use your crimpers, anything that you think might help you solder better. You can definitely use that. All right, so I'm going to pre-tin that. I'm going to worry about the ground for the humbucker side a little bit later. So again, trying to navigate this. I'm going to try to do this so my hand doesn't get in the way. I did a video one time, and my hand was in the video the whole time and didn't make YouTube very happy, so I'll try to not do that. All right, so we've got those grounded. Single coils are grounded. Now we're moving into this area of the switch. So we're gonna kind of hang out at the switch in a little bit. We're gonna kind of come back around and work through a few of these other areas. So next up, we're gonna go ahead and take our ground wire that we've already pre-soldered. This is going through the lug here and to the side of the pot. So I typically like to pull off the cloth and use this inner solid core as my ground wire back and forth to here. Now, I don't recommend just using your hands on holding those pieces. You can get your other pliers, and kind of as you get like the hot solder, you can pull them up against there and make sure you got a nice solder joint. Excess wire back here, we're going to just trim that off. So we've got our ground between the pots. On a lot of diagrams, you're going to see like big loops. I like to have a nice clean straight line between the two. And this always ends up being kind of the way that I do it. I follow the ground wire and I kind of work back, and I try to focus on the switch all at once, especially because we have these add neck wires. I need to do all the switch elements at the same time, so I'll come back to that. And then what I'm going to do here is add some solder to the top of that bottom tone. And this is going to be where the jack wire is coming off. So this is going to be the ground. So my grounds are all connected now, and I can ground this to the jack itself. So what I'll do is basically take my solder, and I grab like another piece of black wire. I like to keep everything coordinated. If you're looking to, black is ground, white is hot, I just only keep it that way. I'm going to pre-tin that wire, and I'm going to make sure I have a really nice and clean solder joint to solder right to the back of that pot. So now I have my ground wires for the jack, and I'll go ahead and hook up the jack and kind of, again, work backwards. There is no method to this madness. It's just about getting the job done, but being detailed and making sure that you're going through and looking for everything. So we've got kind of our length that I predetermined this length from just measuring it out. You want to definitely do like 4 or 5 inches or more past here, because some Strats, they've got to go into that that cavity for the jack plate. So you want to make sure that those are cut evenly, and I've got those cut here. So I'm going to slide this over so then we can kind of focus on where we're going to be wiring up the jack. So same with these cloth pushback wires, you just hold on to them, push them back to reveal the insides. And then we're going to go for the ground. So if you look at a typical jack, you're going to see kind of this inner metal part where it connects to the metal. That is the ground side of the jack, and then the hot is to the outside. That's the best way I like to think about it. So inside hot, or inside ground, outside hot. Just pay attention. So grounding is obviously to the inner metal. The thing I like about these braids is you push them back, you can crimp those two, so that way they stay in place, and so I've got kind of like metal to metal contact there, and then I can go ahead and add my solder, and it's kind of holding it for me, which is really nice. If you've messed with soldering stuff before, it's really quite a pain when everything flies around. So everything looks good there. I'm going to just do a quick inspection on the inside. I want to make sure there's no wires that are going to come in contact with a cable that might be put in there, and I want to have enough room to kind of stay away from this as the cable comes in. Everything looks good there. So now we're going to jump back into this portion here. I'm going to just keep sliding it a little closer. All right, so next up we're probably going to be focusing on the capacitor. I'll use a variety of capacitors. This is a very simple capacitor that you can find at Mauser, and I love these things. They are the standard on our pickguards. They sound great. You use them on the guitars as well. So if you follow your typical Strat diagram for wiring, you're going to have the wire running across from this lug to this lug over here, and then the cap is just going to lay on top here. So basically what I'm trying to do is, again, making it as easy as I can on myself, is let everything kind of just lay in there. So I run it through there, and then I'm going to go backwards through this chain to try to get all the soldering done without disturbing this and without making it move. So I'm just going to work back through all these elements and make sure that I'm getting nice contact here. And again, now I've got my final lug of my capacitor. I'm just going to go ahead and solder it to there. You can pre-pool the solder there. With these smaller lugs, it doesn't usually matter. You have just something to hold it down. Got nice clean solder joints all the way through here. And then I'm going to trim the excess off the ends, and we're good to go with our capacitor installation. Now we're getting close to this switch area, so this is where it gets kind of messy. There's not much you can do about some of these, and you can go super extreme on that if you want. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this wire from the pot over to the switch, and as you see on a typical Strat diagram, I've left a little bit extra here because that is going to loop over to the opposite row of lugs. And if you're always confused about which way to put the 5-way in, just think of it as the overhanging lugs need to be closest to the electronics. That's the best way you could do it. Think of it as you install. So on this side, I'm going to wait to solder, but I'm going to go ahead and solder these 2 wires that are in this location here. Now this is a hybrid again of a standard 5-way switch. So even though it's our 5-way Strat diagram, so even though it's HSS, it's still going to be the same as a 5-way. So I'm going to leave that over there, because then we're going to start soldering in to each of these places. So this is going to be the neck, this is going to be the middle, and this is going to be the bridge. So and then we're going to connect the pots to each place for the tone as well. So let's jump over to a diagram. I'm going to show you a diagram that we use to show you where to put this. You can search on the internet and find it. Really easy to kind of follow for sure. And I'm gonna hook up these two first, because then these cloth wires, again, you can bend them and mold them kind of however you want. And that's going to allow me to tuck this 4-conductor underneath, the excess 4-conductor underneath kind of this whole wiring assembly, just to make it neater and kind of hold everything down, because really you want to be able to take this and just drop it into your guitar. So let's do that first. We're going to go ahead and get these 2 pickups trimmed. So this will be the neck pickup that's going to go in right here. So I'm going to trim it, and keeping in mind I did mark this, so I don't want to get lost on that. I'm going to push this back and I'm going to put it in there, and you can crimp it over as well, just to kind of keep that metal to metal contact. Same with the middle pickup, and that one we can go ahead and solder in because there is nothing else connecting to that circuit for the middle pickup. So we don't have to overthink that middle too much, and sometimes it's nice to just get some of these things soldered down if you know you're not going to add anything extra to it. All right, so we got those 2 soldered down. Now we're going to take this 4-conductor coming out from the bridge humbucker. I'm going to tuck it underneath this assembly, and I'm going to try to bring it right around the end of this lug. So I don't want to impede any kind of raising or lowering of the pickup. I want to make sure that I have enough kind of to navigate the whole thing. So typically this is standard, stripped back pretty far. That's going to allow me to get the wires here for the push-pull. It's going to allow me to get the wires here for the hot, and then for the ground on our humbucker. So I think I'm going to just leave this. If you're installing this for yourself, you might want to be able to, or you might need to strip it back a little bit farther. And for that we use a vice grip type wire stripper, which works really well for these plastic shielded wires. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to kind of fold it and navigate it down in here. So underneath these cloth wires, again keeping that pressure down on the cloth wires, that's going to allow me to kind of make this neater. And I probably would, on most guitars, maybe trim this even shorter. I do like to leave it long in case someone ever wants to change things around, maybe when they want to move the push-pull down. I want to leave extra length for a customer, so even if it makes it look maybe a little bit messier in there, that's actually the way I prefer to do it. So I will change this camera angle so you can see nice up close on the switch, and we'll get wiring. We've got kind of this push-pull area to deal with. I want to tack all of these wires down before then we go back through and start adding the tone wires. Again, you might have a preferred method, and you might be thinking, well, this is kind of crazy. And that's fine. This is the way that we're going to do it for this video. So we've got one remaining lug hiding back over here on the ends. That is going to be our hot for our bridge humbucker. I'm going to run that wire through, and I'm going to pull it over so it's kind of in place without really worrying about it. Next, I want to go back over here to the push-pull, and hopefully you can see that on the camera. Just bring it right up there so it's kind of in view. Right above that ground wire that we had earlier, I'm going to put the green and white in here, and then I'm going to pull that over and give it a nice little crimp so that it's not going anywhere. So then essentially I've got my hot wire and I've got my coil split already ready to go. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I get solder on both of those. Then I'm going to come back and actually hit that ground wire over here. I'm going to give it just a bit better angle. Sorry about that. Just trying to look through the viewfinder at the same time just to make sure you guys can see that. So I'm going to go sneak in here from the side and get the green and white soldered to that lug. And if you look up a push-pull coil split, you can kind of see in more detail how that's wired. And there's a little bit of overhang on that wire, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off. And so I've got now these 2 wires nicely wired in here. And then the last thing I want to do is get the ground for the humbucker done. So I'm going to go and use the same, just like right over here, you can kind of see off to the side here. I'm going to go ahead and use the same ground area that we did for this wire coming from the push-pull. And I'm going to go ahead and ground. This is already pre-tinned, so I can go ahead and sneak that wire back in here and get the red and the bare grounded to the same spot. Right. And always just try to focus on making clean solder joints, making sure you have really good connections to everything. You want to make sure that you're not messing anything up that way. On these push poles, you can solder to the top of them. I typically like to solder to the little shelves here because there's just a nice flat surface that I can work with. Now that that's together, I can finish sort of tucking this assembly back underneath everything else and kind of using these cloth wires to sort of push everything down. So there we go. We kind of have a little bit of a like a wire snake kind of coming through here, but that keeps everything together. That keeps it all in one spot. And then now we're going to hook up the add neck feature. We're going to finish soldering in a couple of these places that we have not soldered, the neck pickup and then the kind of like the master output of the switch here. And we're almost done. So let's get that last little bit going. All right, so hopefully we can see this on the camera. I'll pull it right down here. This is how to wire a neck on switch. This is a drawing by Rothstein Guitars. Guitar-mod.com. Check that out. You can look that up, take a little screen capture of that. You can find it online as well. It shows you where your neck tone needs to come in. It shows you where your middle tone needs to come in. And then it shows you which of the lugs down below from that on switch. So this shows a push-pull pot, but again, we're using a on MIDI toggle. So you can see there's 2 rows on that diagram, and we're basically just copying that single row from the MIDI toggle down there. So that's what's happening. So I'll get this kind of lined up here and we'll follow this diagram and get everything hooked up. So according to the diagram there, we have this lower wire that needs to go to where the neck pickup comes in. So that's going to be over here into this second lug where that white cloth is coming in. So that's why we didn't solder it from before. So I'll kind of run this wire around and then we'll just kind of slide it, if you can, slide it right in there from the side, making sure everything's connected. And then I'm going to add some solder to that point. And then the middle section here is going to go to where the output of the switch is going to, back to the pot, kind of tracing it back. We're going to run that one here. So essentially you can see what's happening is when you pull this, or when you flick the switch, you're basically, then you can see how the neck circuit is coming into the equation. And then basically when it's off, there's nothing on the other side of this lug, and so that shows you how it's kind of like turning the toggle off essentially. All right, so that's all wired in. And I'm going to switch the camera one more time just to kind of show you an overhead shot. I know this is kind of a very elongated shot, but I want to show you kind of an overhead shot as we put the final couple wires in. All right, here's a look from overhead. So now we are going to add in the last couple wires. You can use the excess cutoff wires from the ends of the pickups. That's always a good idea. This is going to be our neck pickup tone. So that's going to go from the middle lug here. Again, these pots are sharing the capacitor. So that's going to go from the middle lug here to the first lug on this other side. I was trying to think of like a good way to define it, but it's kind of the best way that I think about when it hooks up. All right, so we're going to run from there to the lug here, and again, that cloth wire is all helping push down that 4 conductor. We're going to cut it to length, push it back, push it up in there. Again, I like to angle it so that it does have metal to metal contact. It's always a good idea. You can crimp it over like a lot of people do, and we'll get that one soldered in. Same thing for the bridge, for the middle tone. If you want to make this and also functioning for the bridge tone, then the only thing you would need to do is make a jumper from here to here. So we're going to go from the middle lug here to this lug, which would just be neck or middle tone only. If I want this to be middle and bridge, I would need a jumper connecting both. If I want it to be just bridge, it would go to this lug here. So that's kind of the way that that will hook this up. For now, this one is going to control both. So I'm going to run this here, and this is one area where you might want to be careful of making sure that you don't touch the wire from the capacitor, because it can definitely cause some issues if you're crossing up those wires. So like sometimes I will push this back just to make sure I'm not touching anything. And again, I'm going to kind of route this as cleanly as I can. I'm going to run it here knowing that I'm going to want this to control both of these. I'm going to try to get those other wires out of the way. I'm going to cut this just a little bit long of that second lug, and then I'm going to go push it back as far as I can. And typically I'm going to go back to my crimper pliers here, pull it. I'm going to run it through this side. You can run it up through this one as well, but I usually will just drape it across the top and then pull it down. And trying to keep some of these other wires like sort of out of the way. I see this one may be a problem here, so I'm going to move it over, and then that keeps me from melting those as I solder this together. Right, we will solder in those last two. Sometimes you might need to hold it down again, keeping any surrounding wires away from it. We're not trying to make any funny connections there, but we now have our completely wired pickguard, and we're going to go over to the amp and do a quick tap test and make sure everything's working the way we want it. Alright, so now we have the pickguard plugged straight into the amp. You can hear some of the noise back there, single coil buzz kind of coming through. I'm going to start with the neck pickup, and I'm going to run down. I like to use a pretty heavy duty screwdriver for the tap test. I want to hear a good thumping sound in case there was a phasing issue, in case there's a wiring issue. Sometimes you want to hear the strongest signal possible. So I'm going to start with the neck pickup. You can hear that. I'm going to go to the neck tone. Make sure that that's muddy. Kind of as I move the tone down, I can hear that the tone is working. I want to make sure that's good. I'll start with the volume knob, turning that off. Volume knob's working fine. So that's good. I'm going to move down now to neck middle. Now I know that I wired this bottom tone for the middle and the bridge, so you should be able to hit that middle, kind of hear that tone knob engaging. You kind of hear it get kind of quacky sounding. That seems fine there. Gonna go to the middle, check that middle, double check that tone. Sounds good. Now we've got our mini toggle. Let's see if we wired that correctly. Right now you can see there's nothing happening when I hit the neck. When I flip this down, there's that neck engaged, neck turned off, and I'm on the middle position there. So you can see that mini toggle appears to be working great. Let's go down to the bridge, and this is where I kind of be more careful with the screwdriver because I'm trying to just check everything here. That looks good. I'm getting a very strong tap from both the slug and the screw side of that. And now in this position too, I don't have the neck, making sure that neck's in there. So that's where you get all three pickups on, which is pretty cool. I'm going to turn that back off. Everything looks good there. I'll check the tone knob again. Sounds good. I'm going to go down to the bridge. Now I'm going to check a couple things on the bridge humbucker. One, I'm going to go back and check my add neck switch that's still working in the circuit there. Looking good. So now there is that bridge neck position. Now I'm going to check my push-pull and make sure that we wired that correctly. Right now, I get a nice strong signal when I tap the slug coil. If I pull that, you can hear the noise kind of coming from the amp there, so that's a good sign that we went to single coil mode. Very faint tap here. And as I push it back down, nice and loud. So everything's working great. So now I can go with a single here and a single here by adding that neck. Or I can bring it back into full humbucker and the add neck. So everything is good to go. The last thing I'm going to do is zero out all these pots so that I can put them on zero when I install them, and we are good to go. All right, so we got through that. That was a lot of stuff to show you. Hopefully everything kind of came out clear. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Again, my tendency is to go a little bit long on a lot of these things, but I really want to show you guys what goes into these. I want to show you how you can add some of these elements to your pickguard if you want, and just kind of the way that it looks under the hood. Now we've got our beautiful guard here ready to be delivered, shipped out today to the customer. So wow, what a fun project. And I know that again, I know that sometimes wiring can be daunting, and we encourage you guys to go for it. Pick up a Squire, pick up something simple, something that's not super expensive, and just start trying it. At the end of the day, some of these components are not too expensive. If you want to buy the pickups from us and maybe practice on some cheaper pickups first, and then put them in yourselves, always happy to help with any type of DIY or things like that. In 2024, we're planning on doing a lot more of these type of videos, and again, not massively overly produced, not the best lighting, not the best audio, but really we're trying to get to the result, which is teaching and showing stuff that's cool on guitar. So that's what we want to do on the channel. Some of our best viewed videos are our worst produced videos, and I'm not trying to necessarily do that over and over again, but I want to show you guys kind of what goes into the wiring, and obviously a lot of fun stuff, a lot of fun tones. And again, at the end there, I want to show you how we test them as well, because that's a quick audio test. We're not actually putting them in the guitar, but we're listening for what we're trying to accomplish. And that tap test can save you a lot of headache before you put something like this in your guitar, and you can then make sure there's no surprises at the end. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate a like or a comment or subscription to our channel here on YouTube, and any questions below, feel free to hit me with them. Thanks so much.